All right, good morning, everyone. A few of us just wrapped up a roundtable with cannabis stakeholders, and now we are up here to look at a very, very, very rough draft of our elections miscellaneous bill. We have both the bill itself and an overview posted on the committee page. And the goal today is, I want to stress this, this is not the part where we're going to get granular with a lot of things. We're really just going to go through the components that are in here as just a starting point for the conversations. So what we have in front of us is a compilation of things that were discussed and did not move last year or last biennium. Some input from League of Cities and Towns, some input from the Secretary of State's office, as well as a couple of pieces that were requests to consider from various members. So we are just really taking our first poke at this. This is going to require a very notable amount of committee time over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to really just run through this, dry run, and I'll probably pause for some light questions as we go through some of the sections here. But please write down questions that you may have. And then on cue, Bob, love it.
Yes. Lead to open up the morning.
Right. So with that, I'd like to invite council up to the table so we can start going through the meat of the matter. Mr. Devlin, good morning.
Morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, Chair Byron. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. You have draft 1.5 of the Elections Miscellaneous Bill, and this is draft request number 25-0242. And you also will have available a overview of draft 1.5. Chair Byron, would you like me to, from what I just heard, keep it very high level, and maybe I'll stop and I'll just kind of stop when there's points of inquiry or ask request for more detail. I can drill into the bill language itself, but I figured I kind of start with just kind of making my way through the overview itself.
Yes, I think that's a great plan. So working off of the more condensed document, I think is probably the best utilization of time right now, just to get a broad understanding of what we got built into this thing. So
absolutely,
please proceed.
So let's see. The overview, just for reference, this is the one which is 8 pages and has overview in the top text there. I'll begin with just the real broad strokes of the bill. This is the purpose. This bill proposes to institute ranked choice voting for the 2028 presidential primary election for each major political party, but sunset the same law on July 1st, 2029. So essentially just having a one-off use of ranked choice voting for the presidential primary. Bill will also have mail-in ballots sent to voters for primary elections in addition to general elections. It will prohibit candidates from receiving cross nominations from multiple political parties. It will enable voters who are ill, injured, or have a disability, and as well as overseas voters, to return ballots electronically. It will require candidates to provide additional demographic information, and it will require write-in candidates to file consent of candidacy forms in advance of an election, and to increase the minimum threshold for write-in candidates in primary elections. It will make various modifications to campaign finance reporting and requirements, as well as require the Secretary of State to perform an audit of all voter checklists for representative districts and senatorial districts to ensure that those checklists accurately correspond to the prescribed district boundaries. And finally, it will modify various state and local election procedures. And I should just note that last section, the modification of state and local election procedures, are really the local aspect of election procedures. That's what my colleague attorney Tucker Anderson will kind of step in there. So part 1 of the bill, this has to do with ranked choice voting, or well, maybe kind of use the shorthand RCV for the presidential primary elections. This is sections 1 through 4. Just want to make some initial notes about this. The form, or rather the methodology for RCV in this bill will be what's typically called an instant runoff voting, or IRV. The mechanics of IRV are described in some detail in an appendix 1 at the very end of this. So it'll be basically the last page and some. If you like to scroll down, I'm not going to get into that today. Oh, and I should just also start that the relevant statutes in this part of the bill are located in Title 17, which is elections, Chapter 57, presidential elections, and then a subchapter 1, presidential primaries. Section 1 will redesignate some existing statutes to essentially kind of make room, shifting them back. There's no real significant changes to those. That is the checklist and for provisions applicable. Section 2 will add and modify statutory sections to enable RCV in presidential primary elections. These amendments include creating a new definition section, modifying ballot requirements to be renumbered 2702 and 2705 to explicitly require that a presidential primary election for a major political party be conducted using RCV. These sections will also note the type of RCV methodology to be used, and permitting a party to award delegates either on a winner take all or proportional basis. That choice still remains in the hands of political parties themselves. Tabulation of ballots will be in a new section 2707 with direction on how to award delegates depending on whether the party opts to award delegates, again, either on a winner take all or proportional basis. And then results reporting will be in a new section 2708, which includes information from canvassing committees in 2709. Section 3, the bill will create a new section 2710 and will direct the Secretary, the Office of the Secretary of State to adopt rules to address various aspects of administration and implementation of RCV. And Section 4 will require the Secretary of State to ensure that canvassing forms, including tally sheets, summary sheets, and returns, are all designed to accommodate ranked choice voting. And I'll just stop there and have to the next part of the bill for any questions on ranked choice voting quickly.
Okay, so I mean, for members who were here last biennium, we had a lot of conversations in and around RCV. So is everybody comfortable with at least what this is framing for a conversation, or at least understood to what it's framing?
Okay. Part 2 of the bill, this is sections 5 through 7, is a prospective repeal of those very same laws implementing ranked choice voting for presidential primary elections. And let's see, they put July 1st, 2029 will restore the law to how it is currently today. Part 3 of the bill pertains to cross nominations. And this is what you'll typically hear is referred to as fusion candidates. And again, just to kind of put everybody on the same page, a very brief definition of the idea of cross nomination or fusion candidacy, the process in which a candidate may run for office while being affiliated with multiple political parties. Sections 8 and 9 together limit a candidate to running only under one party. Section 8 will add a new subdivision 5 to 17 VSA 2472 for the contents of ballots, stating that a candidate shall list up to one party next to the candidate's name on the general election ballot. It's kind of worded wonkily, but it's just limiting one. Section 9 will amend 17 VSA 2474 as the choice of party ballots, so that a candidate must choose a single nomination among any parties nominating the candidate and inform the Secretary of State of that choice before the printing of ballots for a general election. And I'll pause there.
Any questions as to the basic structure of those provisions?
Okay. Part 4 of the bill has to do with mail-in ballots for primary and general elections, as well as electronic ballot returns. These two distinct items have been rolled into 3 sections here just because they amend the same statutes. This is section 10 through 13. Section 10 will amend 172537A to expand the mailing of ballots to include regular primary elections. And then sections 11 through 13 will enable electronic ballot returns for votes, for voters who have a disability, as well as overseas voters by means of a secure online portal administered by the Secretary of State. And I should just note here that the dissemination of ballots, those individuals are already in statute, but the return of the ballots is what we're focusing on here. Section 11 in particular will amend 17 VSA 2539, which is the delivery of early voter absentee ballots, to add a definition of overseas voters as which is, as you know, based on the definition of overseas voters in the United States. Uniform and Overseas Citizen Absentee Voting Act, or UCAVA, in the U.S. Code. And I should note that this will capture active military as well as other individuals who are overseas at the time of the issuance of those ballots. It also adds a new subsection D to enable voters who participate in the Secretary of State's address confidentiality program to receive ballots electronically. Section 12 amends 17 VSA 2542, signing certificate, enabling the voter affirmation to be available electronically rather than only in print. And section 13 will amend 17 VSA 2543, the return of ballots, specifically adding language enabling electronic ballot returns for voters who have a disability, as well as overseas voters by means of a secure online portal administered by the Secretary of State.
Excuse me, Tim.
Yes.
Going back to address confidentiality.
Yes.
Program, that is something that doesn't currently exist. Is that correct?
The program itself, or the allowance for individuals enrolled in those programs to receive ballots electronically?
Either. How about addressing both?
I'm not familiar with the program itself. I presume it stood up. I don't know anything about it personally. I'd have to inquire with the Secretary of State's office to see exactly the composition of the program and any of its various facets. This, though, the statute is presuming that it's operational already and would essentially add a new category of persons to the finite list of people who can receive ballots electronically.
Thank you. I was recalling from our last discussion, last biennium about this, that there was a program that the Secretary of State's office wasn't actively using it. They were getting information on it, but I could be incorrect about that. Correct, Principal?
There currently is a confidentiality program in the system. However, they are not one of the ones that are who are permissible to file electronically at this point. They have to vote in person or request an absentee ballot.
Thank you for that. Being a town clerk, you're familiar with that. So if I could ask an additional question of you, is anyone authorized to use that system currently in Vermont?
The only ones that get absentee ballots currently are military overseas and citizens that are living overseas.
And if I recall correctly, they are not allowed to submit them back electronically.
Correct.
Is that
They
correct?
have to, they're a mail-in.
Thank you.
They get submitted electronically, they print them out, they print out the cover, the affidavit stating that their ballot is closed in a certain envelope, they tape that to the envelope, they mail that back.
Thank you.
I do have a question, if I may.
Please.
My question is, who is the return ballot going to be going to? Is it going to be going to the clerk's office, or is it going to go directly to the Secretary of State?
Let's see, it is a online portal administered by the Secretary of State, and I believe how it's configured currently, or in the statute, that is the preferred statute, and it would be relayed back to the clerks, I think, what they brought the Secretary of State's office. I'd have to double check.
I seem to recall that was the structure that was discussed last year.
But there was also, if I recall correctly, the provision that they could be returned directly to the Secretary of State as
And
well, or it was a decision point. which was not made because it was not adopted.
I would just be concerned about the confidentiality of that ballot.
And so we have, this is, can be found in the bill at the bottom of page 23, starting on line 11. All ballots electronically delivered pursuant to the above. Entitled to voters with disabilities and overseas voters. And returned as follows should be counted. Romanet I, by means of a secure online portal administered by the Secretary of State directly to the clerk before the close of business in the last day of the clerk's office is open prior to the election. Let's see, and with electronic signature on the certificate required pursuant to the above, submitting ballot to the clerk. Then relevant language here. Yes, the ballot electronically delivered as such, then returned as such, shall be printed by the clerk and processed in the same manner as all other earlier absentee ballots and in accordance with the procedures prescribed by the subchapter. And then the voter shall be notified when the ballot electronically is delivered and received and printed by the clerk, pursuant to the above.
Again, concerns. That's
I
fine.
know, and that's why we're doing this, flag it, yep, this is just going through the driest of dry runs, yeah.
The next part of the bill pertains to candidate demographic information. And sections 14 through 16 will enable the collection of demographic information voluntarily provided. I should correct one of my statements in the intro where I said it was required. I'll go back and update the overview to emphasize the fact that this is voluntarily provided properly by the candidates. Again, sections 14 through 16 will enable the collection of demographic information voluntarily provided by candidates running for local, but school boards, county and state offices, specifically the name, gender, age, race, or ethnicity. And really, there's just a repetition of those requirements in across 3 different statutory sections. Okay. The next part of the bill has to do with the write-in candidate registration and minimum thresholds in primary elections. This is sections 17 through 19. And together, these sections will require a write-in candidate for the General Assembly, any county office, any state office, or any federal office to register as by filing a consent candidacy form no later than 5 p.m. on the second Friday preceding the primary election. Section 17 specifically, and let me just stop here and say, would you like me to drill into this further, or just go?
You know what, like, well, yeah, why don't you?
Yes.
I feel like we have time
Sure.
allotted, so please go ahead.
So section 17 amends 17 VSA 2370. That's the writing. In Title 17, this is under Chapter 4 for nominations, Subchapter 1 primary elections. And we'll add a new subsection A. Of note, section 17 will also, in a to be designated subsection B, increase the threshold for write-in candidates who win a primary election, so that a write-in candidate must receive the same number of votes as the number of signatures required for the candidate's office on a primary petition, except if the write-in candidate receives more votes than a candidate whose name is printed on the ballots, in which case the write-in candidate wins. So section 18 will amend 17 VSA 2472, that is the contents balance, adding new subsection to require a write-in candidate to file a consent candidacy form no later than 5 p.m. on the second Friday preceding the primary election in order for the write-in candidate's votes to count. And I should just make a quick note, this statutory section, that is 2472, is moved in 2 places in the bill. And so just adding a different subset. And I should note in the bill itself, there's a typo. It says section B5, it should be B6. That'll be corrected in future version. Section 19 will amend 17 VSA, section 2587, those rules for counting votes. Particularly subsection E regarding how clerks count votes. In brief, if a vote for a write-in candidate in an election for General Assembly, state office, or federal office that had not registered prior to the election, the vote shall be counted as, quote, a write-in vote that is without consent of the candidate, end quote. The election officials counting ballots and tallying results shall only list the names and votes received of registered write-in candidates. Any write-in votes for candidates who have not consented to write-in candidacy shall be listed as write-ins. And
Yes, Representative Hoover.
So this effectively eliminates the ability for a citizens group to get together and say, let's elect Tim for this. Tim doesn't know about it, Tim doesn't, and Tim gets a winning number of votes. They're still excluded.
it would preserve local elections, not to occur in local elections. But these other ones, if Tim, in your example, hadn't filed a consent candidacy form by 5 p.m. on second Friday preceding the primary election, whatever.
Do you have any questions on this?
So much.
Part 7 relates to campaign finance. Sections 20 through 23 are covered here. The first few sections, that is 20 through 21, remove various monetary thresholds so that instead of surpassing a certain dollar amount, for example, $500 in expenditures and contributions, all candidates instead are to register with the Secretary of State with the necessary financial information, regardless of any monies received or spent. So before, you had to kind of reach either accept $500 or spend $500, and then you would have to register with the Secretary of State as a candidate with those various financial disclosures. Now we would change it to no threshold. Everybody is, whether you spend $0 or X number of dollars or receive. Okay. Section 22 amends 17 VSA 2901. This is definitions. A few different definitional tweaks here, 3 in particular. One, it will remove the definition for quote independent expenditure only political committee. Quote, will modify the definition, existing definition of political committee or political action committee, as it's also referred to here. It will modify it from, let's see, political committee, meaning, let's see, any one individual, changing it to any, sorry, it was originally 2 individuals, changing it to any one individual that accepts contributions of $1,000 or more, makes expenditures of $1,000 or more, in a 2-year general election cycle for the purpose of supporting or opposing one or more candidates, influencing the election, or advocating a position on a public question in any election. The crucial information that's changed here was 2 individuals, now it's dropped to 1 individual. Third definition being modified here, actually being created, is a public questions campaign. If we like, I can read that in there, but
Please, actually,
Sure.
yeah.
pull up the language in the statute and it's found. There. It's to be found on the top of page 33. Public question campaign means a political campaign that conducts its activities entirely independent of candidates, does not give contributions to candidates, political committees, or political parties, does not make related expenditures, and is not closely related to a political party or political committee that makes contributions to candidates or makes related expenditures.
And what would be an example of that sort of theoretically in the world?
Sure. So this is limited to public questions. Thinking bonds, charter changes, other
Ballot initiatives.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of items. Classic public questions. And so this political campaign, sorry, I'm just kind of digesting the definition myself in a moment here. Limiting of coordination. Here, there's a kind of an open question. Here it says entirely independent of candidates, because it's a public question campaign. Candidates in it. So maybe this definition could be tightened up a little bit. Looking at it again. But really, I guess, a political campaign that is not related to existing political parties or existing candidates could make sense. That's entirely possible to happen, actually, just a third party, unrelated to established these are actors.
So, and less about candidates, or political campaigns, but more about like individual questions that appear on a ballot for voters that are unrelated to a specific. Any questions? All right.
Part 8 has to do with audit of voter checklists and district boundaries. This is just one section, section 24, the session law that requires the Secretary of State, in consultation with town clerks and local boards of civil authority, perform an audit on or before November 15th, 2025, for all voter checklists or representative districts and senatorial districts to ensure that those checklists accurately correspond to prescribed district boundaries.
Any questions on that piece?
Glad to see it there.
All right.
Okay.
Yep.
The next part of the bill has to do with deadline modifications and miscellaneous clarifications. Section 25 amends 17 VSA. Section 1971, casting more than one ballot, to make explicit that voters may not vote in multiple jurisdictions, essentially the same related election. That is, can't vote for president in multiple states. Section 23 repeals a now redundant section 1973, voting in more than one place. It's kind of essentially 25 and 26 clarify and inflate two different statutes. Section 27 amends 17 VSA 2103 definitions, and this is the general definitions for all of Title 17. And so by modifying the definition of campaign to mean any organization or coordinated activity undertaken by one or more persons. And this is a change from how it was previously undertaken by two or more people. Section 28 amends 17 VSA, section 2358, examining petitions, supplementary petitions, to allow election officers to return defective petitions and signatures to a candidate within 2 business days from receipt. It was previously, currently, instead of 72 hours. Section 29 amends 17 VSA, section 2313, filing a certificate of organization is found in chapter 45, political parties. And this amendment will require political chairs and secretaries to file digital records when filing a certificate of organization. Section 30 will amend 17 VSA, section 2413, the nomination of justices of peace, by inserting a deadline of, quote, the 3rd Monday in July before each primary election, for town party members to nominate candidates for justice of the peace. And I believe before it was just simply before the primary election. Section 31 amends 17 VSA 2493 for the use of vote tabulators and audits, by removing the requirement that a post-election audit performed by the Secretary of State's office of vote tabulators be random. So it just removes the 2 instances of the word random. Not random audits, just audits.
Just not.
Section 32 amends 17 VSA section 2546. That is the receipt of ballots by clerk, voter status, opportunity to cure, preceding absentee ballots, and this can be found in chapter 51 regarding the conduct of elections. This amendment will permit town clerks to begin processing mail-in ballots 45 days before the election day instead of 30 days. Any questions there?
Representative Pismal.
On the allowing the candidate 2 business days for a defective ballot or
Yes.
petition, it's even petitions. Is it then also going to change on the other end as to the date that the number of hours they have to get it back to us?
The change.
We're
in
changing
here
it from
is-
72 hours to 22 business days. Then how many days do they have to get it back after they've corrected the petition?
That is the only change in there, so no other modifications. I don't know off the top of my head, but that number is how long we have to get it back. Let's see, I can certainly look into that. Eight. Blank. Would you like me to look into it a little bit later? I can.
Yeah, we, at some point, just, I want to make sure that, because right now I think they have until Wednesday. It's Wednesday. So yeah, I just want to make sure that they're not getting shortened or given a week. I mean, because we have deadlines to meet on the other end as to file when the petitions have to be filed.
I can certainly verify that.
So I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
And that concludes my sections. I invite my colleague, Attorney Anderson up.
All right. Well, thank you for that,
Thank you.
council, and yeah, that's a. Yeah, a lot of fun doing all that stuff.
All right, good morning, Tucker Anderson, Legislative Counsel. I'll be taking you through part 10. This is the local elections sections. I gave you many reader assistance headings here because these 10 sections are really all over the place as far as what is being amended within the local election systems. And in fact, we will start with section 33, which is an amendment to the open meeting law. And this amendment changes the definition to both meeting and public body to make it express that annual meetings, your town meetings every year, are not open meetings subject to the open meeting law. And for background, this is something that is assumed already by the definition of public body, because annual meetings are gatherings of voters. They are not gatherings of the members of a public body. These amendments would make it express that the annual meeting is neither a meeting under the open meeting law, and that the gathering of the voters is not a public body that would be subject to the open meeting law. Section 34 strikes the words present and before voting within the Australian ballot system requirement for votes on whether or not local governments will allow the operation of cannabis establishments within the town. There will be a few of these amendments within this section of the bill, and they are responding to some confusion about whether or not that clause, present and voting, means that there's no opportunity for mail-in issues. Section 35 is going to contain a few amendments, all within Chapter 55, Subchapter 2 of Title 17, which is the subchapter that deals with annual municipal meetings. The first is in 17 VSA, Section 2640. And this states that an affirmative vote within this section remains in effect until rescinded by a majority of the voters at an annual or special meeting duly warned for that purpose. So there will be some cleaning up throughout these sections of the bill that will expressly state that an affirmative vote within a particular system in the local elections chapter stays in effect until it's rescinded by the voters. In section 2642 of Title 17, if you're following along in the bill, this is on page 40. This is relating to petitions and when petitions may be withdrawn. Under the current procedures, voters, individual voters who have signed a petition that is going to be warned and noticed for a town vote may remove their individual names. And this proposed amendment in subdivision A3D proposes to allow the voter who acted as the lead petitioner to withdraw the entire petition, not just their name. Moving on to page 41 in section 2645. This is the section that deals with the comprehensive procedures that must be followed for a municipality to propose the adoption or amendment of a municipal charter. And there is some confusion about the timelines that apply to warning and notice throughout the process of proposing a town charter, because there are public hearings on charter language that must precede the vote at an annual or special meeting. And under the current language, the entirety of both the public hearings and the vote must be warned and noticed according to 17 VSA section 2641. And that could potentially, interpret it under its strictest terms, require a 30-day notice before the public hearings that have to be held before the actual vote on the charter, which under longer timelines could extend the warning and notice beyond 70 days from the actual vote on the charter.
Representative Hoover of
Is there-
Burlington.
Any statutory requirement that once a charter change has been voted on and approved, it comes to us? That if we don't incorporate it in the charter, that it continues to live in infamy? Or is it a one vote, one denial?
There's nothing in statute regarding that, and we've, I think, touched on that specific question in this committee a few times over the last couple biennia. Once a municipality has voted in the affirmative to propose a charter adoption or amendment, it has been sent to you and it is within your plenary authority to say no, say yes, revive it in the future. The voters of the municipality have used their voices to send the proposal to you. And there is nothing in statute that extinguishes a proposal if the General Assembly doesn't act on it within a particular biennium.
Did you have a follow-up to that, Representative?
Well, I mean, it might be an opportunity, since we're delving in there, to look into it once more and decide if there should be a window of, if 4 generations of people go by and all of a sudden the charter change pops up again, it might not be valid anymore.
Make a note of that. I think that's a valid question for us to discuss.
We are still on page 41. There's an amendment in 17 VSA section 2651A related to the election of constables, and that amendment strikes the requirement that they be elected by Australian ballot. Then in subsection B of the same section, there is a repeal of the requirement that the vote to authorize the select board to appoint constables become effective only on a 2/3 vote of those voting. If there is a written protest against delegating that authority to the select board. So that's current law. And this proposes to repeal that, which would bring constables on par with all other appointed officers.
Okay, so that what you were just describing for the constables, if this were to move forward, it makes it uniform to the other officers, whereas that provision is unique to constables in this one.
Correct.
Thanks. Representative Pisnall.
And the select board could make that decision without going to the voters that they're going to appoint.
So this has to go to the voters.
Has to go to the voters with 2/3.
If there's a written protest.
If there's a protest, whether there's no protest, they can just make a motion that they're going to take the constables off the ballot every year and put them.
I will take a step back because we're about to get into all of these discretionary appointment statutes in Title 17. So there's a list of officers that are under general law required to be elected by the voters of the municipality. Then there are individual sections in Title 17 that allow the municipality to propose to appoint those officers instead of electing them. The list is town clerk, town treasurer, constable, highway foreman. There's 7 or 8 of them.
Tree board, yeah.
Each of those has to be approved by the voters before it's shifted from an elected official to an appointed official. The constable provisions have a special subsection that says that if there's a written protest signed by the voters against holding the vote, that the annual meeting vote has to be 2/3 of those present and voting in order to actually shift it. We're about to move through a couple sections that are all amended in the same manner. So I'll just cover them by saying for each of the officers I'm about to list, the proposal is to remove the requirement that they only be removed from their appointed position for just cause following a hearing. It also sets their terms to 1-year terms. Right now, these appointed offices can be set for longer terms. This is going to set the statutory term for each of these offices to 1 year. And again, remove the requirement that they can only be removed from their office for just cause after a hearing. So the officers who will now fall under this are the collector of delinquent taxes, municipal clerk, and the municipal treasurer. And you'll see that all of those conforming amendments are the same, striking the just cause requirement and inserting a 1-year term. We're on page 43 in section 2662 of Title 17. If you move along with me onto page 44, you'll see some of the new language. What this section does is it allows the legislative body and the municipality to validate the results of an annual meeting vote if an error is found. And there are existing criteria that we can go through during a deep dive of the bill of what may be corrected in this manner. And this proposes to allow technical errors within the contents of a ballot to be corrected and validated at a later date.
What would be an example of that in practice?
If there was a technical error within one of the public questions that has been put to the voters, let's say around a discretionary budget item, and there is pointed out to the legislative body at a later date, and there's a challenge, hey, the language here was wrong, the decimal point was in the wrong place, then the legislative body could hold a later meeting to validate the results despite the defective language in the ballot. All right, we're moving into section 36. These are amendments within subchapter 3 of chapter 55 related to the use of the Australian ballot system in local elections. The first amendment is within your dear old friend 17 VSA section 2680 within subsection H, which relates to hearings held before an Australian ballot vote. And the new language is going to be on page 45. This amendment is essentially stating that unless otherwise specified in state law that the Australian ballot system of voting is used, but there's not an express requirement for an informational hearing, that there will not be a requirement for the informational hearing. So this establishes a standard that, for example, when there's a requirement for Australian ballot voting to authorize cannabis establishments, the section that we were in at the beginning of this section of the walkthrough, there's no requirement for informational hearings baked into that Australian ballot system requirement. So there would be no default requirement for an informational hearing to be held. In 17 VSA section 2681, this is compressing the timeline for nomination petitions to be delivered to the municipal clerk to better align that time frame with the other requirements, for example, notice and warning for the election of an officer. So right now, the timelines in some cases don't perfectly match up because the nomination petitions are delivered within a window that extends beyond the warning and notice requirements. We are moving into section 37, which amends 20 VSA, section 2485, to clarify within the election of prudential committee officers in fire districts that those are voters of the fire district. There is a policy choice to be made in here. The directive for this section was to clarify whether or not there is a requirement for the prudential committee members to be voters of the fire district, or whether they could be elected from outside of the fire district. And I defaulted to just using the term voters because it's already defined in this particular subchapter as residents of the fire district. So policy choice to be made there for you all if you want to change that and allow extraterritorial election of these officers, you can certainly do that. Section 38, this is going to amend subchapter 6 of chapter 33 of title 24, so we're out of title 17 for a little while, related to vacancies in municipal offices. First, we're on page 47 in section 961. This clarifies that this section relates to elected municipal officers, so that there will not be confusion moving forward as to whether these vacancy requirements also apply to appointed officers. In section 962, there's some clarifying technical amendments to make sure that the special meetings referred to in this section and throughout this subchapter are in fact special municipal meetings, i.e. Meetings of the voters and not special meetings of the legislative body under the open meeting law. Section,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This might be a typographical, but it says, when an elected municipal officer resigns the officer's office, has been removed from the office, dies, becomes unable to perform the officer's duties due to a mental condition or psychiatric disability, or removes from the municipality, wouldn't it just say, or moves from the municipality?
removes is the wonderful legalistic term for when you move out of your place of residence.
Okay.
Yes,
Is that where we apply the phraseology term of art?
yes. At some
Removes,
point, we
okay.
will remove from statements after addressing.
Okay.
Section 963 is amended to clarify that the select board is not required to appoint a replacement or call an election for the replacement of a vacancy if the vacancy occurs within 90 days of the annual meeting. Moving on to section 39 on page 48. There's going to be a few sections here related to the authority of constables. First, in 24 VSA section 1529, there is some clarification that this applies to appointed or elected constables, since constables can be appointed. 24 VSA section 1936A is amended, section 40, the bottom of page 48. And this is one of those instances where it's being updated to clarify that a vote concerning an issue remains in effect until rescinded by a subsequent vote of the voters. And that's all. Section 41 is the effective date, and for the time being, this is all set to take effect on passage.
All right. That was a bit more brisk than I thought it was gonna be. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, committee.
If we want to ask more granular questions right now, please, great. If we want to isolate some sections here with one or both of the members of council to get a little bit more in depth, I'm open to that. What do we think? Representative Hoover.
I'd like to have more discussion on the thing I brought up about the charter charter change potentially never going away. I mean, we could find ourselves in a situation where somebody would suggest a charter change that happened 20 years ago and was a valid vote and still is prime for consideration. And the voters that brought it there might be dead. So short-lived, and I'd also like to arrange for the components of 117 to be in here someplace.
Yes, no, that was definitely a conversation that we had earlier, and I'm very open to having that conversation about including those pieces in there. So, to that question about how long the charters that get brought to the General Assembly can exist for consideration, that's something we're comfortable about talking about now, or do you want to? Thank you. It's such an intriguing.
Well, the premise is the will of the voters, so I guess as time goes by, assuming that the will of the voters is the same, we have a law.
So this is probably a good time to do you have the power speech about being a pure Dillon's rule state, and also about how the General Assembly can and cannot be bound. So to start at the top, the Vermont Constitution grants the General Assembly the plenary authority to create and control the political subdivisions of the state, and most expressly municipal corporations. So you create all of the municipal corporations in the state, you control the powers and authority they have, and you prescribe the procedures that they have to follow, which is what 17 VSA 2645 is. A comprehensive set of procedures that municipalities must follow in order to propose a charter amendment. Charters, of course, are special law passed by the General Assembly. We contain them in Title 24 Appendix so that they are codified and available to the public and to you all, but they are a collection of state law affecting one municipality at a time. So that is why 2645 says that these are proposals being submitted by the municipalities. They are asking for something from you all. So under your request, question, proposal, the procedure could be amended to expressly require municipalities or tell them that they have to revote after a certain number of years, that there's an expiration date on their charter proposals. And the municipalities would have to follow that, except that in the end, you all could do whatever you want anyway. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you've reviewed charters, has anyone opened the charter packets that I send you from the Secretary of State? Because the clerks of those municipalities compile every single shred of evidence that is necessary under state law and submit it for your consideration, because that's what's required by the procedure. And I have assisted committees in the past in evaluating those packets to determine whether the law was followed to a T. And when it has not, there have been iterations of this committee that deny charters based on their failure to meet the requirements of 172645. On the other hand, there have been many committees that disregard procedural defects in the adoption of a charter and move charters forward anyway. So you have examples of your discretionary authority as the powerful body that enacts these laws to say no or say yes, to honor the procedure in 2645, or to completely disregard it and move things forward anyway. It's within your discretion. So with that noted, yes, you could put an expiration date on these things, but that would not stop an individual member from reviving a dead charter proposal and introducing it. And if it is the will of the House, the will of the Senate, and the collective consensus will of the General Assembly, you could amend a charter with a dead proposal anyway.
Representative Hagan.
So by resurrecting it, you mean across biennia, someone could bring it back up. And that begs the question for me, something we dealt with in Bennington 1, how do you how do you act on something that was voted on with a specific subset of voters at that time that doesn't exist now?
That is the conundrum for all of you in all of the work that you do. I suppose the great benefit of working on delegations of legislative authority within a charter is that you have at least some express message from the voters about what you're doing with that legislative power. Most of the decisions the General Assembly makes are not based on referenda, right? Many of the bills that will pass through this committee, you don't have a vote of the voters on saying whether or not they want that.
So this is hypothetical. We could put expiration dates on charters. Just like we introduce a bill for a biennium, and if it doesn't go anywhere, it dies. I'm just thinking aloud here.
Yeah.
And
No, no,
I'm
no.
seeing you nod your head,
No,
but
no,
that's,
yeah.
that's a possibility. That's something to think about, I guess.
As you move forward with your consideration of this, I would advise you think about how long the timeline would be for expiration. Just because, as you know, the annual meeting dates are different and staggered depending on the municipality. And there may be municipalities that, for example, vote on their charters in May. And if they did that in the second year of the biennium, and the expiration was one biennium at a time,
Yeah.
they would
Fired them up.
Great example,
That would-
because I was
yeah.
thinking in my head, sure, the end of the biennium, but that would not be a good situation for those communities.
Representative Waters Evans, I see your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking about, is it Brattleboro? The voting for the teenagers and municipal elections that came up last biennium. I believe, I could be wrong, that was the third time that had been introduced, that charter. I'm wondering if you, because you sort of know everything, if you can recall any other instances of ones that lasted that long or longer than that, or if there's a way we can delve into that.
So the first non-citizen voting charter amendment, Montpelier, lasted more than a biennium. It went to the Senate where it hung out for a little while. The biennium ended and it came back the first year of the following biennium. I can recall anecdotally a few that have been introduced and not taken up in the last few months of a biennium and then reintroduced in the fall of the following year.
Representative Wade.
Going off of that, that Brattleboro charter was also vetoed by the governor in a previous biennium. Are there other charters where that has also happened too?
Yes. Yeah, so the most recent besides that I can remember was the just cause eviction proposals in Burlington were vetoed. The veto was sustained and it is not part of the charter, but it's currently out there, so to speak.
Fascinating.
Yeah, we needed to get into just like the broader understanding of how these things exist and function. So this is a great tutorial and a refresh for all of us. All right. Anything else on this particular piece, council? All right. We want to noodle on next, team. Open table.
Can I ask about ranked choice voting?
Certainly.
Um,
Well, now we got to tap out. There we go.
Oh,
Sidecar.
gotcha.
I liked it.
Is there a huge, who's pushing for this? I mean,
Our office
It's-
doesn't.
Yeah, that's,
Sells with,
They don't.
okay, so
there are a range of advocacy organizations and elected members of this body who
who are asking for this?
pursuing this, yes.
So my biggest concern of this, because it's a huge learning curve for not only the clerks, but also for the voter, who is going to educate the participants? Cause it's gonna. I think 2026 is too soon.
For 2028.
Or 2028. I mean,
Yes.
there's just so much to take in that my biggest concern is, one, who's gonna educate everybody and who's gonna pay for that education? Not the municipalities would be my vote. Not the clerks association. Yeah, so that's my biggest concern. I can see a huge pullback on that, just from a clerk's perspective. But yes, I'm just curious. What if we just remove it? Do we have an option, just remove it completely and not even put it in the bill?
Of course. No, absolutely. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, we're having this
But we're doing-
conversation. So like an understanding of the mechanics is something, you know, we'll take testimony on, because there are a lot of people who want to see this happen. So we need to like educate ourselves as we make this decision. And just one thing, and then getting an understanding of what it would look like for like education timeline and implementation. So those are all very valid aspects of this discussion. Representative Stone.
I was wondering, this is more a question for the chair/table. Does the Director of Civic and Voter Engagement still exist under the Secretary of State? I know that position was created last biennium, right? Robin Palmer,
What is the position again?
Director of Civic and Voter Engagement.
Never heard of her.
Just with all these changes, I think it's important to highlight like that position, her LinkedIn still exists, but
Is it staffed? I don't know. Can somebody
Yes.
ask the Google machine?
yeah. But just kind of maybe bringing someone like that in would be helpful to answer those questions. Perhaps.
Yeah, no, for sure. So within like the mechanics and the operation of it, so this structure right now, this language is sort of how it got whittled down the last time this committee considered this provision. So returning members would have seen that there was a much broader function of this being applied into our election process. And this would isolate it to the 2028 presidential primary only with a sunset. So
What's the sunset for?
because it's just sort of a test. In
Pilot
theory,
program.
these words right now are using it as a pilot to see how it is received by not only the municipal election
Testing.
officials and the voters themselves.
Testing the H bomb.
So just yeah, so that's how the language is structured right now is essentially an elections pilot.
Just to answer your question, Rep Stone, but Google search doesn't turn up anybody.
Oh, it did
would
for me.
Definitely be a question for the elections division.
I just added the person on LinkedIn, so.
Okay,
We're
so
getting somewhere.
the position exists. Good to know.
Any questions for council on like the words and page and like what the function of this application would function?
I do have one question about section 8, the audit of voter checklists and district boundaries. I mean, clearly, some of that is
Where are we?
section 8. Audit of voter checklists
Yeah.
and district boundaries,
Well, I
so
don't
I
wanna
guess
find the
that's
actual-
off the overview, it's not off the big bill.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to.
In the bill, that would be section 24,
Section
24, thank you, sir.
and that's at the bottom of page 33.
Thank you, sir.
So not having read that really closely, I'm assuming that came out of some of our concerns that we've identified in
And it can-
recent weeks. And wondering what that would look like. It's obviously up to us to dictate how many voters are surveyed or how that audit is done. Is that correct?
Yes, it's up to this committee's discretion to prescribe wants and parameters for what the audit should consist of. Right now, it's the language is let's see, Secretary of State or the Secretary's designee in consultation with town clerks and local boards of civil authority, so there's a cooperative aspect to it, shall perform an audit of all voter checklists for representative districts and senatorial districts, so it's comprehensive across the state. And then to ensure accuracy, those checklists accurately correspond to the prescribed district boundaries. And then there's a requirement for written report. On or before November 25th, 2025, the Secretary shall submit a written report to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs, this committee, and its sister committee, the Senate Committee on Government Operations, with the secretaries.
Okay, great, thank you. I had missed the word all voter checklists, so I appreciate that, and also appreciate that there's a report in a timely manner come back to us.
And there's, I mean, this is not a lot of words, but that is a very large impact.
It is.
So
Yes.
that's gonna, this section, whatever we do with it, whatever it looks like, once you finish working on it, is gonna require a lot of folks. And then so bear with me for a moment to jump a little later in the week, we're gonna have folks from Secretary of State's office and the Reapportionment Board in, or a tutorial on Friday. We are joint meeting with Senate Operations, so that could be an opportunity perhaps to just kind of start addressing some thoughts within this, but this is a very, very, very captured. Very, but also understanding what we encountered with our first legislative endeavor, I guess we'll call it. You know, we went through the banking issue. There was a lot of concerns raised by the committee and the testimony from, you know, about whether or not that was an isolated scenario. So that's why this language exists, is because of the desires and intentions of the committee as we navigate. And it's reflecting of that workload. Questions?
Thanks. I'd like to request committee members, if you have individuals you'd like to hear from about any of these sections, the sooner we know, the better. We get them on our schedule to hear from people, particularly if you have any concerns about anything. Now's the time to hear from folks.
Should we make those suggestions now?
I just,
Whenever you'd like.
Let's go through this stuff. We can see, like, I think individual members can take a look at these. We're also going to assign sections of this bill to members of the committee to work on as primary point people. Because we have a lot of big things in front of us. So we are going to do task-oriented projects within some of these bigger bills we're doing with individual members. And we touched on that lightly as how we were going to assign things this way for workload. We were discussing projects several weeks ago. So this bill is going to be reflective of that task-oriented assignments. So.
no. Thanks.
All right. Any other sections? We still have these gentlemen for another 20-25 minutes. Representative Small.
I was reading it earlier, trying to find it. It was about a fee that was to be paid for a candidate.
There was the thing about the candidate filings,
Yeah,
and there's a $500 threshold that would initiate the need for the candidate to file. The language would remove that threshold and just require all candidates to file without having raised dollars. Is that what you're thinking of?
I'll try to find it. Go ahead.
Representative Boyd.
Does that also remove the threshold for the media filings? I believe there's a $500 reporting requirement if you spend on media.
Let's see, we refer to section 21 of the bill, and this is, let's see,
I'm sorry, Council, did you say 21?
Yes, 21, and this should be at the bottom of page 30, and this will modify, amend, that is 17 VSA 2964, having to do with campaign reports, candidates for state office, general assembly, state office, here we go, political committees, political parties. So it removes the candidates, that $500, that's in subsection 1, A1, A2, breaking to page 32. Removes it for candidates for 4-year term, county office. And doesn't look like it removes it for other entities. Let me scroll up to 21, or sorry, section 20, just kind of check that. Candidates again. No, I believe it's just limited to candidates, those types. And I should state, I'm unsure of whether there was a threshold in place currently, current law for those other kind of media entities. But maybe it doesn't.
I'm trying to remember too. What the current statute.
I can certainly look into it.
Valid question. So let's so the fusion candidates piece. Is everybody clear with that? I'm just kind of running down things for whether the DRCD. Representative Waters Evans and then Tisman.
Well, I had a question about a different thing,
Sure,
about
fire away.
section 18. Which is about the write-in candidates. It's on page 5, the draft. So can you clarify, so when we say to have votes counted for a write-in candidate. A write-in candidate for nomination by any major political party shall file with the Secretary of State a form sending to candidacy for office. That is only for major political parties. I'm wondering if it's. I wonder about kind of nullifying any other write-in votes that would this eliminate the need for a town clerk to even count write-in votes then? If someone were to maybe not start a last minute campaign, but I know that a chunk of time is taken up by town clerks and election officials counting those write-in votes, but saying that a major political party needs to count them, then would it be any written in Democrat would be, do you understand where I'm going with this? Does it have that effect,
Sure.
doing
I
the
think
language
I'm
in this
fine.
way?
It's about how they would be categorized. Instead of individual, like clerks individually noting, person X or person Y, which they currently have to do in the Secretary of State for every write-in. It would enable them to kind of group them into just a category of write-ins instead of filling it, essentially saving clerks time, I believe is the idea behind that. I'd have to double check the exact same language to the section language to see which particular offices are affected by this and party, as you were saying there. But that's essentially the gist of it, as I understand it. Am I at all answering your question? I may not be.
Ish, I'm not even sure what my question was. I'm just, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to get at something that's in there that I'm wondering what happens to all the write-in votes if we say this happens. Does this?
Essentially, I'm stumbling myself. I
Okay,
apologize.
maybe this
I'm
is
not
something
really
we come back to then. I'll
Yes.
make a more specific question and figure it out when I'm assuming we're gonna be talking about this in depth later on, but it's just something to think about.
So my understanding is this would require basically notification of the clerk that there would be the intent of the campaigns. They would be able to identify those names as a candidate instead of writing a campaign. This is the final deadline. And this would also kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Result in people sort of like unknowingly being like elected for positions. I can't have a instance, for example, where somebody just like 7 people wrote in like a random leader and all of a sudden they're a lister, and they're like, I don't want to be a lister. Hey, am I on the right target here?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Cause all then Boyd.
A clerk's dream would be that it would be required to file a candidate write-in campaign. I would even write up till 5 o'clock the day of the election, just slipping a note that, yes, I'm doing a write-in campaign at the last minute. Over the weekend, we decided we're gonna do a write-in campaign. So that the clerks wouldn't have to look at all of the write-ins unless you announced that you were doing a write-in campaign. But save a lot of time, and then just all those other write-ins, just do miscellaneous write-ins, 200 whatever votes there are.
And that's where you
But
can
you'd
get like,
only look for those that cleared a write-in candidacy.
and
You
that's
mean
sort
you
of,
only count
You would only count them looking for that name. If anybody else, you wouldn't even bother, because there's still so many people that write in.
well, that's just like actual humans and like the proverbial like Yosemite Sam write-ins. right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Representative Ward?
Yeah.
Okay.
But right, I did find that it's under nominating petitions. It says a person shall print primary ballot, Each petition shall be accompanied by a filing fee of $2,000 to be paid to the Secretary of State. However, if the petition of a candidate is accompanied by the affidavit of the candidate, which shall be available for public inspection, that candidate and the candidate's campaign committee. So we're asking anybody that's
Hold
going,
on.
Where-
Where are
I'm
you?
on page 4.
You're on page 4, and that is on the bottom, and you're looking at subdivision.
2703
Yep, E,
E.
correct. Okay,
So are we saying that every candidate would have to file a $2,000 filing fee?
This is current law,
This is
and it's
existing.
particular to presidential primaries.
Oh, presidential I was thinking, I'm sorry. I was like, wow, that's gonna eliminate some people out of office.
No.
Sorry.
No, and this is stuff that's already existing in statute.
Okay, I was like,
Yes, that is not something.
I
we're
didn't read the
amending.
first paragraph of page of my political party, sorry. I just saw the $2,000 and I was like, wow.
Representative Waters Evans.
Is there currently a law or is there a statute regarding write-ins about fictional characters or Paul Simon or whoever who's not gonna
They're-
move here and be a town clerk?
Not treated different.
Oh, okay.
From, I should say it's immaterial whether somebody writes in a fictitious or deceased person. The clerk would handle it as if it was a candidate.
What happens in a case like that when we're counting write-ins? You take it as, you lower the write-in count, like somebody writes for Mickey Mouse. You remove it as a write-in and you add it to the blanks. So that you're balanced.
But that's fictional, right?
Right.
That's not,
But Pete,
like a
this past
celebrity.
election, I had 17 votes for P Diddy. Okay, and then I also had his real name, and I didn't even know what his real name was, and one of my PCA workers goes, oh, that's P Diddy's real name, or Alphonse, or whatever, but yeah. It's a waste of time. That's why if they don't declare, it would just save so much time at the end of the night. You wouldn't have to search for all those write-ins that people continue to write down. Or their father, their brother, their sister, their mother, whatever.
Representative Boyd.
my question, I guess more so for Sandy, for deceased people, does that get counted as an actual write-in or is it a blank?
It's a blank.
Like,
If I
If you know.
knowingly know
Somebody
that that person has
can't roll.
passed, then it goes to blank. Cause you have to get those numbers to balance at the end of the night, but it's hours. And I'm a small town, so somebody like city like Burlington, that's gotta look at every single ballot, that's got a write-in on it, yeah. Feel for them.
And we did have a lot of, we did have discussion on some of these topics last cycle. Representative Coffin.
That was one more thing that was questioning me because they seem to contradict. For a write-in, someone who's writing in, they have to declare 2 weeks prior. Is that, or no, they don't right now, but in this new, they would have to. But ballots start getting counted at 45 days prior, according to this, the mail-in ballots get
Proposal.
in the proposal. That's what I'm talking about, the proposal. So in that proposal, or even if it stays the same at 30 days, but we change the rule that they have to declare 2 weeks, no less than 2 weeks prior. If someone had started talking to people and saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing a write-in, and they get written in on a ballot that's mailed in, that ballot gets counted 45 days prior, but they've only gone to the town clerk 2 weeks prior. What happens to that previous ballot? Do the clerks have to then go back and recount those, because now they would be losing votes?
Once the ballot's cast, it's cast.
Yeah.
There's no going back to changing.
It's submitted.
Right, if the person has their name written on that ballot though, and you've discarded it as a blank because they haven't.
Oh, no, you don't physically count.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, please.
Oh, no.
You don't, we're not physically counting those ballots at that point, so we don't know what the results are. We may be feeding them into the voting machine, but we don't know. There's no way of doing a to say, oh, we've got so many write-ins. It's locked. That you can't see it until the end of the night of election night that you run it. So if somebody wrote in a write-in, it's in there, but we wouldn't know, or they didn't write a write-in and they wish they'd written a write-in, it's too late.
Okay, the language was confusing. It says start counting.
Yeah, it's
Which
not really
means-
counting. It's just submitting them into the voting machine
Okay,
so that we're allowed to open them up and some processing, but we don't know the results.
that explains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're basically
Thank you.
just inserting it into the tabulator.
Right.
As like an opening.
But you
stage of
can't
the
look at every day,
process.
oh, Joe Smith is 22 votes ahead. We need to get, there's none of that.
And you're not like running it like any kind of lump.
No,
Anything like
no,
that.
you're not allowed to.
Getting exactly, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. You're just getting ahead
start.
of the insertion into the tabulator as not to have a backlog on election day.
It's just an interesting concept for towns that don't use tabulators.
Mhm.
It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a town who doesn't use a tabulator cannot physically, they can open up the outside envelope to verify that signed as an affidavit signed that that's the ballot, but they can't physically open them up until whatever their polls open that morning to look at the ballots.
Okay.
And there's a whole process and recommendation on how to do that too.
Representative Hooper Brown.
So if we're using a tabulator, how do you do the distinction between there's a write-in on that ballot and
The machine does it.
picks it out?
Kicks it out and says you gotta hand count it, right?
Representative Stone.
I'm just wondering for legislative council, are we asking them questions right now or?
Feel free.
I just,
Oh.
no, I just felt bad because they're just sitting here
No.
listening to us talk and I didn't know if we were supposed to be asking them questions or talking
little
amongst
bit of both.
ourselves.
It's
Committee
a-
Okay.
Might be learning too.
I just wanted to be respectful of y'all, so I just wanted to make sure.
Representative Nugent.
Just another section that feels like we should have some discussion on is the 14 about the demographic information that's required for there to be filed.
Where was that page?
23.
Page 23.
Page 23, section.
Yep.
No, and demographic information was also something that was discussed last biennium. So this is part of sort of, I believe it was. So. Then page 23.
Is that right?
It's on page 23. It's the bottom section, section 14.
Oh, gotcha.
Running through 16, I should just say that it's the reporting of it is required from clerks, although the candidates themselves voluntarily provide that information, and they're not penalized for not providing it. So a candidate who's not providing information pertaining to gender, age, or race or ethnicity may still appear on the ballot if all other requirements are met. I should also note that there is Public Records Act exemption. Actually, further than that, this information should be kept confidential.
Why would it be being gathered?
I believe goes to the Secretary of State's office for, let's see, publication in aggregate form.
Representative Israel?
Well, currently the petitions are public record. So with that information on there, why would it not be so that they would be no longer be, petitions would no longer be public record?
No, only the select information on it would be excerpted, not the entire record.
And how would we disseminate that? Because of if they're handing you a petition with that information on there and it goes in vault or storage and somebody wants a public record of somebody's petition, am I to redact that before I give it out?
Yes.
Okay.
And as Tim pointed out, the shall be kept confidential language wherever it appears in the statute is a mandate on the public agency to never release that information to the public.
Representative Nugent?
I totally probably reading this wrong, but it says within 3 days after the last day of filing petitions, all county and county clerks who have received petitions shall file with the secretary a list containing the name and gender. So that seems required to me, but am I reading it wrong?
Sorry, so this is in section 14?
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever information that has been collected by the clerks, at that point, they are required to pass it on to the Secretary of State's office, but they may not receive any information, essentially. Because it's up to the candidate to voluntarily provide that. So they can, or maybe they won't, and whatever the clerks have, then they pass it on. So it's a mandate on the clerks, you're right, Representative Nugent, there's some requirement here. But it's important, I think, to distinguish which party is under which mandate.
So as a clerk, when they come in, you tell them, don't fill that section out.
We're just going through it and understanding what it is right now, so we can decide whether or not it's worthy of remaining. Okay, any other sections though where people have questions? Representative White?
Maybe this is just going over my head, but this is already optional on the form.
You're still on this.
Yeah, the
Personal
candidate
Yeah, yeah,
demographic data, it first on the form as a candidate. It's already on the form and optional to list it.
Yeah.
I'm just confused.
So I guess, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just curious.
I think I just need to sit on this one.
Okay.
Are you asking if it's already
It is
on the form, why do we need legislation for it?
Yes.
Tucker, you look like you might have an answer. Even though it's no.
A response that we give frequently is that often some of the amendments to statute are bringing the law
To match the form.
to match practice.
That makes sense.
So currently, Tim, I guess, it's not required, but it may already be out there.
Sure. Currently, under 17 VS 361 candidate forms, consent shall set forth the name of the candidate, as the candidate wishes to have it printed on the ballot, the candidate's town of residence, and correct mailing address. And that's it under B1. I can pull up the rest of that, which I see else there. I don't think so. And then also if a candidate wishes to use nickname, format on the ballot, there'll be candidate's first name, nickname, mutations, etc. And then there's other prohibitions on things like professional titles, but that's about it.
I remember having this discussion last biennium
Yes.
And I did not recall that we did not dictate an outcome of the discussion, so perhaps it's just something that got added.
So you're saying like when this. You're saying not the proposed new language. Language that's read.
I'm just saying, I think what Representative Boyden's saying is that we already have a form that we fill out that calls for the optional providing of information about demographics. But this bill has a requirement, so we're just not sure where the disconnect is. Did we already authorize somebody to do this? Or was it done as a matter of practice of the Secretary of State's office to put that in to ask people, ask candidates? And then this is put in the bill to codify that. Because it's clearly already happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a deeper question for us to consider, in the like 7 to 10 minutes we have left right now.
And I've just taken a cursory look at a few different consent candidate forms in various jurisdictions. And not all of them have the ones I've looked at for Lincoln, it's like Walcott. Office, name of town or city, let's see, name, town of residence, party, or the only things there. So I wouldn't, my snap judgment on this is to think that the statute has provided the floor, and perhaps some municipalities or other jurisdictions have added to it, just on their own volition.
And Tim, would this language in the proposed bill require it of all electoral candidates in the state of Vermont, whether it's municipal elections or statewide?
Let's see, let me pull this up, see where we are in the 17.
Can you remind me what page that is again?
Yes, we're on page 23. That's where section 14 starts, and then there's these sections of section 14 through 16. And one moment. Statute.
Just.
Jason, I'm trying to think.
Come back.
I have to double check that.
This one definitely is in
Yeah.
the local elections chapter.
Anyway, rather than just kind of spout off with the incorrect information, let me just get you the right one.
Thank you.
All right. We're creeping up on lunch here. This was dense.
It was really
Anything?
good. Thank you.
Yeah, no. This is the workshop part of trying to figure out what we want to really maintain, retain, jettison, and dive into. So this document is going to be very, very involved product and how we get from the road here. So, council, you guys are amazing. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And unless there's anything else from the table,
No.
we'll hit the pause button until after lunch. How's that sound?